Hello. Today we're starting a new series on Mercury in the signs. Mercury is often reduced to communication, intellect, and the way someone speaks. That is true, but it only tells part of the story. In a chart, Mercury shows how your mind takes in the world, how it organizes experience, and how it turns observation into meaning. It describes the way you think, the way you learn, the way you ask questions, and the way you try to make sense of what is happening around you. It also reveals how you explain yourself, how you solve problems, how you listen, and what kind of information your mind naturally looks for. This is why Mercury is not only about talking. It is about perception. It is about interpretation. It is about the mental rhythm you move through life with, whether you realize it or not. Two people can hear the same thing and walk away with completely different conclusions. One notices the facts. Another notices the tone. One wants the big picture first, another needs details before anything makes sense. One speaks quickly because the ideas are arriving all at once, while another takes more time because they want every word to be precise. That difference is not random. Mercury explains it. The sign Mercury is in shows how the mind takes shape. It changes the thinking style, the communication pattern, and the way a person gathers, sorts, and shares information. Some Mercury placements think out loud and discover their point while speaking. Others need silence first because the mind wants to organize everything internally before anything is said. Some communicate directly and immediately. Others communicate carefully, indirectly, or with more nuance. Some learn through movement and discussion. Others learn through repetition, reflection, or analysis. The same applies to decision-making, misunderstanding, and mental stress. Mercury shows what your mind returns to by default. It shows how you process pressure, where your thinking becomes sharp or scattered, where you may over-explain, overthink, shut down, or miss what is right in front of you because your attention is trained in a certain direction. It also shows your natural intelligence, not in a shallow or one-dimensional way, but in the way your mind actually works when it is engaged, curious, and alive. In the natal chart, the sign shows the style, the house shows where Mercury is most active, and the aspects show whether the mind moves with ease, tension, speed, intensity, or contradiction. So in this series, we're starting with the sign. We're going to look at how Mercury operates in each sign, how it thinks, how it learns, how it communicates, what it needs in order to stay clear, and where it can get trapped in habits of thought that stop being useful. No recycled keywords, no flat stereotypes, and no treating people like a single trait. Just how the placement actually works. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to follow the series, and book a consultation for a more personal understanding of your chart. Mercury in Pisces. Mercury in Pisces does not think in straight lines unless it absolutely has to. It drifts, senses, absorbs, wanders, connects, imagines, remembers something half visible, and then suddenly arrives at a conclusion that sounded impossible 5 minutes ago, but turns out to be exactly right. In astrology, Mercury describes perception, language, learning style, interpretation, reasoning, and the way a person turns experience into thought. Pisces changes that process by loosening the edges. The mind becomes more intuitive, more symbolic, more porous, and much less interested in reducing life to only what can be measured cleanly. This is not usually a Mercury placement that trusts the obvious layer of reality more than its own impressions. It often picks up mood, atmosphere, implication, and all the strange little signals that do not fit into bullet points very neatly, that can make the person seem dreamy, elusive, or hard to pin down in conventional conversation. It can also make them uncannily perceptive. Pisces is mutable water, traditionally ruled by Jupiter and in modern astrology associated with Neptune. Mutable signs dissolve boundaries and move between states. Water signs feel, absorb, and respond through undercurrents rather than surface logic alone. Jupiter adds breadth and imagination. Neptune adds sensitivity, symbolism, and a relationship to mystery that does not particularly care whether the spreadsheet is impressed. So when Mercury lands here, the mind tends to operate through feeling tones, images, associations, and subtle understanding rather than hard-edged mental structure alone. That does not mean Mercury in Pisces is irrational. It means its intelligence is often nonlinear. The person may understand something before they can fully explain how they know it. They may hear a story and immediately feel where it is false, where it is wounded, where it is incomplete, or where the real meaning lives underneath the official version. They may struggle to present that knowing in strict sequence, but the knowing itself is often real. Mercury in Pisces often has a strong relationship to metaphor, memory through feeling, imagination, visual language, music, story, poetry, and all the forms of thought that do not fit neatly inside literal analysis. Many people with this placement think in atmosphere first. The idea arrives with a mood attached to it. The memory returns with a color, a sound, a texture, a strange emotional temperature that tells them more than a timeline would. Because of that, they can be excellent writers, artists, musicians, therapists, spiritual thinkers, performers, and listeners who understand the emotional truth of what someone is trying to say even before the wording becomes exact. There is often softness in the speech, but softness should not be mistaken for emptiness. Mercury in Pisces can be extraordinarily insightful. It often notices where a person is confused, what they cannot quite say, what pain is moving behind the polished version, or what part of the situation has been left out because it was too difficult to explain directly. This sign can be deeply compassionate in the way it listens. It does not always demand that everything be presented in perfect logical order before it grants something meaning. People often feel heard by Mercury in Pisces because this placement listens for more than content. It listens for the ache in the sentence, the fear in the joke, the exhaustion beneath the politeness, the longing inside the story that was supposed to sound casual. It can hear the emotional current under the language and respond to that current instead of only to the most obvious words. At its best, this sign has a very humane intelligence. It can translate pain without becoming clinical. It can make language more tender without making it weak. It can approach complexity without stripping away the mystery that actually belongs there. When the placement is working well, there can be great precision in the intuition. The person may not always explain things in a rigidly linear way, yet somehow they still reach the center of the matter. A mind this permeable does not always have clean boundaries. Mercury in Pisces can absorb too much, believe too much, blur too much, or get lost in moods, assumptions, fantasies, and possibilities that were never properly checked against reality. The same openness that allows insight can also allow confusion. If the environment is noisy, emotionally manipulative, deceptive, or chaotic, this Mercury may take in the atmosphere so strongly that clear thought becomes much harder to maintain. The person often has to learn the difference between intuition and projection. Both can feel convincing. Only one is actually guidance. Mercury in Pisces may sometimes think it is sensing truth when it is really swimming through fear, hope, memory, idealization, or exhaustion. It can fill in gaps too quickly. It can assume emotional meaning before facts have had time to arrive. It can also drift away from clarity simply because clarity can feel harsh compared with the richer, softer inner world this sign often prefers. In conversation, Mercury in Pisces can be lovely, funny, strange, poetic, elusive, warm, and unexpectedly sharp. The humor is often surreal, observant, or gently absurd. This is the placement that notices the weird emotional weather in a room, the bizarre symbolism of an ordinary moment, or the fact that somebody managed to turn a 2-minute question into a spiritual fog machine. The speaking style may be indirect at times, but not always because the person is hiding. Sometimes the thought genuinely arrives in layers. Sometimes they are trying to say something that does not fit well into blunt language. Sometimes they know exactly what they mean and are still searching for the sentence that will let another person feel it rather than merely hear it. This sign often does not enjoy harsh conversational environments. Aggressive debate, overly literal thinking, constant interruption, or communication that treats every topic like a courtroom can wear it down quickly. Mercury in Pisces usually needs some openness in the atmosphere in order to think well. If it feels emotionally flooded, criticized too quickly, or forced to explain itself before it has found the shape of the thought, It may go quiet or become even harder to follow. That does not mean this placement is incapable of logic. It means logic does not always come first. Sometimes the person needs to sense the whole before they can sort the parts. Sometimes they need space before they can speak clearly. Sometimes they know more than they can prove in the moment. Learning style reflects that too. Mercury in Pisces often does well when material is presented with feeling, imagery, context, story, symbolism, or some emotional point of entry. Purely dry instruction can be hard to retain unless the chart has enough earth or air elsewhere to compensate. The mind often remembers what it could picture, what it could feel, what moved it, or what connected to lived experience. This placement can be very creative in how it understands. It may not memorize through strict repetition alone. It may remember through resonance. One phrase, one image, one emotional association can unlock the entire concept. This is why conventional educational environments do not always show the full intelligence of Mercury in Pisces. In relationships, this Mercury usually needs tenderness, honesty, and room for nuance. It often does not respond well to people who weaponize bluntness and call it maturity. It may also struggle with people who are so defended, dry, or emotionally unavailable that every conversation feels like trying to hug a locked filing cabinet. Mercury in Pisces usually wants something human in the exchange. It tends to communicate care through understanding, patience, softness, humor, imaginative encouragement, and the willingness to meet people where they actually are instead of demanding a performance of coherence at all times. This can make the person very comforting to talk to. The shadow side is that this sign can sometimes say too little, imply too much, or hope to be understood without fully naming what is happening. Mercury in Pisces may assume that if the bond is real, the other person should sense the meaning anyway. Unfortunately, human beings are not telepathic just because the vibes seemed promising on Tuesday. So one of the growth points here is learning that clarity is not cruelty. Saying the thing directly does not automatically destroy the tenderness. Asking for what you need is not a betrayal of nuance. Naming the truth can actually protect the feeling instead of flattening it. This is where the mature version of Mercury in Pisces becomes especially beautiful. It keeps the empathy, the imagination, the sensitivity, and the symbolic richness, but it becomes less slippery. The person learns how to translate intuition into language without draining it of life. They become better at sorting what they feel from what is factual, better at protecting their attention, and better at recognizing when softness needs support from structure. Under stress, the difficult side becomes easier to spot. The person may become scattered, vague, overly idealistic, avoidant, hard to pin down, mentally foggy, or too vulnerable to suggestion. They may retreat into fantasy, nostalgia, escapism, spiritual bypassing, or the hope that if they wait long enough, the difficult conversation will dissolve on its own. That is why grounding matters so much for this placement. Not because it needs to become less imaginative, but because the imagination needs a container. Without one, the mind can become all ocean and no shoreline. With one, Mercury in Pisces can do something remarkable. It can bring subtle understanding into usable form. At its best, this placement gives emotional intelligence, imagination, intuition, verbal softness, creativity, receptivity, and a rare ability to hear what is present beneath the official story. The weaknesses are real. It can become confused, idealizing, evasive, porous, overly impressionable, or too dependent on feeling as evidence. But those are distortions of the gift, not the gift itself. The gift is a mind that can stay open to mystery without entirely losing the thread. Mercury in Pisces is here to listen deeply, speak with soul, and remind us that intelligence is not always linear, loud, or easily measured. Sometimes it arrives as a feeling that turns out to be right. Sometimes it arrives as a metaphor that explains more than a lecture could. Sometimes it arrives as compassion sharp enough to tell the truth without turning the truth into a weapon. And that is a serious gift. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to follow the series, and book a consultation for a more personal understanding of your chart.